So you want to get as many of them into the documented business environment. Right now, many of them, because of these high thresholds, operate underground. But these will encourage them to come into the fold. And they will then be captured, they will then run good businesses, and then you can now tax them. So we're now beginning to do what is right. And in the same spirit, I welcome the introduction, finally, at the federal level, of limited partnerships and limited liability partnerships. And I must give kudos to Lagos, because Lagos did this close to 8-10 years ago, and all that. Again, that will enable you capture more businesses in the informal sector. Because when you saddle people with the responsibility that's not theirs, because you know how partnerships obtain. A partner can be liable for his partner. If you run a partnership in a business, they can come after one or all of them. But now, because, and that's been a deterrent to forming partnerships, even in our profession and all that. But what we now find is the ability to go into partnerships where you limit your liability. And also with LLPs and LPs, we're going to have more and more combinations. And we know that for businesses to thrive, for businesses to have succession plans and all that, you need robust structures. And these LLPs and LPs will provide that.
The provision for electronic transfer of shares, e-transfer, I thought we already had that in some form.
Yeah, electronic transfer of shares. We, in fairness to the CAC, they had been doing a lot of reforms in which you can actually online now check for name availability and all those things and e-transfer. But this is actually putting legislation behind it, which means it recognizes that in the world we live today, IT has taken center stage. So it should be seamless for us to do e-transfer of shares. Don't forget, at the SEC level and at the stock exchange level and co, it's so much easier these days for you to sell and buy shares and all whatnot. So CAC is only again keeping up with that development. So it's so much easier for you to understand that through electronic means you can now dispose of your shares and do treasury. So it doesn't really require too much. There's a lot. By the time of course, we're hoping that the House will toe the line of the Senate to allow most of these, if not all of them, go through, and then of course we'll get the presidential assent. This needs to be done like yesterday, because the business environment is getting more and more sophisticated, and we are struggling as a country to rise in the rankings, the ease of doing business rankings. The vice president was at the PEBEC forum where they were introducing a lot of these reforms. So it's good news that this is coming on the heels of all the good work that is being done. And for my money, I think this is a revolutionary step taken to open up Nigeria to businesses.
The rush to wind up companies when they aren't doing well and when they're in debt, I see that there's a provision targeted at that. How will that work?
If they're unable to pay their debts and all that, it allows for the powers to appoint an administrator who can then continue to keep the business as a going concern. At present, you have two steps in which you have a receiver appointed by the court, and then subsequently, if it doesn't work, the receivership can then be converted to a liquidation status and all that. But before you rush, as it were, to kill a business, you want to see how you can do things differently to save it. So that's another good provision there.
Finally, I want us to talk about power. Power is crucial to business, and I want you to wade in, because there's been this back and forth between the president and the former president on the issue, exchanging words over the amount of money spent. You've been involved as an expert in some of these power agreements and even the implementation. Why do you think that we're not where we should be with the power sector?
If you know where we're coming from with power, an absolute monopoly, public sector monopoly, then the recognition that it wasn't going to work. We went through the stage of unbundling the sector, and then we started doing partial privatization to what you have now. Yeah, we hear too many numbers, too many figures, but the area I would like to concentrate is a part that always has to do with what government needs to do, because of the nature of power, government must always be there to midwife the sector to full bloom. They cannot manage it, that's clear, but they also cannot hands off. And what we see very often, not just with the power sector, is the lack of the unwillingness or to respect agreements, the willingness to respect obligations. That is, generally speaking, if you go through, if you want to go break it right down, you will see that there are so many commitments the government makes, and then either because there's a change of government or change of personnel or whatever, whoever comes in there totally disregards what has happened before. And then you start something entirely new. You create a potential legal minefield. But by far more damaging is the wrong message it sends to investors. Because if investors take a look at you, and they find that because the principal regulator, the mother regulator's government, does not honor obligations, why would they feel comfortable to come into this environment? Look at the power sector that we're talking about. When the privatization was done, it rested on a number of planks. You will allow for cost-reflective tariffs. You would pay the debts owed by the ministries, departments, and agencies. You guarantee a certain minimum of power. You allow for return of investments. They were clearly there. Then you come in. What you found has been a tug of war between people who have taken the risk to put their money in a climate where the government just not interested in those obligations. Instead, new rules come up, new things come up, and then you wonder why the investors are not coming in.